My husband ordered me to apologize or get out of the house. Those were the words that changed everything. I stood in the middle of our living room staring at my husband, Daniel, as if I were seeing him for the first time. His arms were crossed over his chest, his expression cold and impatient. Behind him stood his mother, Margaret, the woman who had spent years making me feel like an unwanted guest in my own marriage. Apologize. Daniel repeated, or pack your things and leave. I could barely believe what I was hearing. Apologize for what I asked quietly. Margaret immediately stepped forward for humiliating me at dinner. I shook my head. I didn't humiliate you. I simply told the truth. The argument had started 2 hours earlier during a family dinner. Margaret had accused me of wasting Daniel's money because I had supposedly bought expensive furniture without asking her permission. The truth was very different. The furniture had been purchased with money from my own business. I had built that business before I met Daniel. It was small at first, but over the years, it became successful enough to support me comfortably. Daniel knew that he had even bragged about my success to his friends. But whenever his mother was around, he acted as though everything I owned belonged to him. At dinner, Margaret had looked directly at me and said, "A good wife doesn't spend her husband's money without permission." I calmly replied, "Fortunately." It wasn't his money. The table went silent. Margaret's face turned red. Daniel didn't defend me instead. He told me I was being disrespectful. Then Margaret began crying. She claimed I had attacked her and destroyed the family. Now, hours later, Daniel expected me to apologize. I looked at him, no. His eyebrows rose. "What did you say?" I said no. Margaret gasped dramatically. Daniel stepped closer. "You're actually refusing yes." "I'm not apologizing for something I didn't do." He pointed toward the hallway, then leave for a moment. I felt my heart break, not because he asked me to leave, because I finally understood that he had been waiting for an excuse. I looked around the house we had shared for 6 years. The photographs, the furniture, the memories. Then I looked at Daniel. "If I leave tonight," I said, "I won't come back." He laughed. "Don't threaten me. I'm not threatening you." I walked upstairs. I began packing quietly. Daniel apparently thought I would change my mind. He followed me into the bedroom and watched as I placed clothes into a suitcase. "You're seriously doing this? You told me to leave. I expected you to calm down." "I am calm." Margaret suddenly appeared in the doorway. "Make sure you leave the Porsche." I stopped. The Porsche. It had been a gift from my father 2 years earlier. The title was in my name. The insurance was in my name. Every payment, every repair, every expense had been paid by me. Margaret knew that, yet she screamed as though she had just caught me stealing from her. "That car stays here." I slowly turned around. Why? Because Daniel's family paid for it. I almost laughed. No. They didn't. Margaret looked at Daniel. He remained silent. That silence told me everything. For years, I had mistaken his silence for neutrality. It wasn't. He had always chosen his mother. I finished packing. Then I walked downstairs. Margaret followed me, still shouting, "You can't take that car." I picked up my keys. "Watch me." She rushed toward the front door. "Daniel, stop her." But Daniel didn't move. I opened the door. Margaret screamed again, "Leave the Porsche." I looked back at her. "You've spent 6 years telling me what I should do tonight. I'm finally listening to one thing you said." She frowned. "What, leave?" Then I walked outside. The Porsche was sitting under the garage lights. I got inside, started the engine, and drove away. For the first time in years, I felt free, but I knew the story wasn't over. The next morning, Daniel called me 17 times. I ignored every call. Then he sent a message. "Come home, we need to talk." I replied with only one sentence. "You told me to leave." He responded immediately. "I didn't mean permanently." I stared at the screen. That was when I realized something important. Daniel wasn't sorry. He was afraid. Afraid that I might actually walk away. Later that afternoon, my attorney called. I had already contacted her, because I knew I needed to protect myself financially. She reviewed our marriage documents, business records, property records, and the Porsche title. Everything was clear. The Porsche was mine. My business was mine, and most of the money Margaret had accused me of spending was money I had earned myself. But there was something else. Several years earlier, Daniel had convinced me to put some of my business profits into an investment account that he claimed would benefit our future. My attorney discovered that Daniel had transferred a large amount of that money into an account connected to his mother. I felt sick. It wasn't just disrespect. It was betrayal that evening. Daniel came to my office. He looked exhausted. "Please come home," I didn't answer. "I made a mistake," he continued. "No," I said. "You made a choice." He looked down. "I was under pressure from your mother." He nodded. I shook my head. "You weren't under pressure when you humiliated me. You weren't under pressure when you told me to apologize for telling the truth. And you weren't under pressure when you told me to get out." He had no answer. Then he whispered, "I love you." I looked at him for a long moment. Love isn't supposed to make you afraid to speak. His eyes filled with tears. "Can we fix this?" I wanted to say yes. Part of me desperately wanted to, but another part remembered every dinner where Margaret criticized me. Every decision Daniel refused to make without consulting her, and every time I swallowed my feelings to keep peace. I realized something painful. I wasn't leaving because of one argument. I was leaving because of 6 years of being treated as though I didn't belong. 3 weeks later, I filed for divorce. Daniel fought it at first. Margaret fought even harder. She claimed I had abandoned the family, but the financial records told the truth. Eventually, the legal process moved forward. I kept my business, I kept my Porsche. And I recovered much of the money that had been transferred without my proper authorization. Months later, I drove past the old house. For a moment, I felt nostalgic. Then I remembered the night Margaret screamed, "Leave the Porsche," I smiled, because that sentence had become the funniest part of the entire story. She thought the Porsche was the thing I was taking away. She never understood that. The most valuable thing I took that night was myself. My confidence, my independence. My dignity and my freedom. I eventually bought a new home, expanded my business, and started traveling again. Daniel sent me one final message. I finally understand what I lost. I didn't respond because I had finally understood something too. Sometimes walking out of a house isn't losing your home. Sometimes it's the first step toward finding yourself. And sometimes, the person who tells you to leave gives you the greatest gift of all. The courage to finally go.